Welcome back to CBS Mornings. We continue our coverage of the new criminal indictment against former President Donald Trump. He is accused of a conspiracy to overturn the 2020 election results, which ended with the January 6th assault on the Capitol. So far, he is the only defendant in this particular case. With us now, John Lauro, an attorney representing the former president. John, good to see you.
Good morning.
Welcome
to be here.
To the set. We're glad to have you here in person. So let's start with some basic information. Is the former president planning to appear in court on Thursday in Washington?
That's really up to the Secret Service and the United States Marshal Service. He's required to appear either virtually or in person on Thursday, and he'll do that.
Does he want to be there in person?
It really depends on the security arrangements, so that's not in our control. But what the president wants to do is absolutely defend himself on these baseless charges. This is the first time that political speech has been criminalized in the history of the United States. It's the first time where a current president is using the criminal process to attack a former president on policy issues. We are in a constitutional abyss right now. We've never seen this in 40 years as a defense lawyer. I've never seen this. But the president wants his day in court. But most importantly, he wants to get to the truth, which we will do in this case.
Current president, of course, says he has not talked to the Attorney General or anyone at the Justice Department about these ongoing cases, specifically knowing that guys like you are
Hunter Biden laptop was a Russian, hoax.
Completely unrelated matter, yes. And we should point out here on page 2, they make very clear, the defendant has a right, like every American, to speak publicly about the election and even to claim falsely that there had been outcome determinative fraud during the election and that he won. The issue is that they're claiming the actions taken and the deception and misleading supporters is what causes the criminal.
Advocacy and political action is equally protected by the First Amendment. So the First Amendment protects President Trump in this way. After 2020, he saw all these irregularities. He got affidavits from around the country, sworn testimony. He saw the rules being changed in the middle of the election process. As a president, he's entitled to speak on those issues. What the government would have to prove in this case, beyond a reasonable doubt, is that that speech is not protected by the First Amendment.
But John,
They'll never be able to do that.
He also, I know the clock is ticking, he also had a steady drumbeat from very qualified, including his own Attorney General, Bill Barr, who said this election was not stolen, Mr. President. He was told time and time and time again. And so he made a decision about which attorneys he would listen to. And I'm trying to figure out what was his process in deciding who he was going to listen to and who he's not, because he had very high qualified top people telling him repeatedly, and court rulings that told him this election was not stolen, yet he continues today to still say it was.
The smoking gun of innocence.
The smoking gun of innocence?
Of innocence, which is a legal opinion from John Eastman, who's a constitutional scholar, who said, Mr. President, even aside from all the allegations of fraud, what you saw were changes in the rules in the middle of the political process. Only the legislatures in the states can make determinations as to the qualifications of electors under Article 2 of the Constitution. So John Eastman, who's an eminent scholar, gave the president an option, actually several options. What the president said is, I'm going to take the option that asks Mr. Pence to pause the voting so we go back to the contested states and allow the states one last time to make a decision on that. Nothing about that is criminal.
But the investigation has shown that Mike Pence wasn't asked to pause the election. That's not what happened.
Actually, ultimately, in the ellipse speech, that's exactly what the president asked. Now, with respect to what the options were, all of the options that were offered to Mr. Pence were in that memo. Ultimately, President Trump, as the last option, asked Mr. Pence to pause the voting, and that was in the ellipse speech.
In the indictment where it says that Donald Trump said to Mike Pence at one point, you're just too honest, what does he mean by that?
Well, we don't even know what the circumstances were of that conversation. We have no idea the context, but what we do know is everything that President Trump did was with the advice of lawyers and counsel. That's an absolute defense to a criminal case. Now, you may disagree about policy or disagree whether or not he made the right decision, but this is the first time that political speech has been criminalized. And they have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he had corrupt intent, which they'll never do.
Are you concerned with the possibility, and it sounds like it's going to happen, that former Vice President Mike Pence is going to be a witness up against the former president?
We expect that he will be a witness, but what he has said consistently is he never thought that the president acted criminally.
He did say he protected the Constitution on that day.
Absolutely, and there's disagreement about what the Constitution means, and that's why you have constitutional scholars fighting this out. Mr. Pence is a lawyer. Not once did he say, Mr. Trump, what you're asking me is criminal. Don't do that.
I want to get you in two other quick things. This is a federal court in Washington.
Yes.
It's going to require a jury. That's a city that voted overwhelmingly against the former president. Would you seek a venue change?
Absolutely. That's one of
Where do
the
you
first
want it to
things
go
we're gonna
instead?
do. Well, there's other options. I mean, there's certainly West Virginia, which is close by. There's other areas of the country.
West Virginia?
Absolutely. It's very in close proximity to D.C.
Which is like the political opposite of Washington, D.C.
Well,
you think you'll
listen,
get a fair trial there?
It's much more diverse in Washington, D.C., which I think went 95% for Mr. Biden.
One other thing.
Or there's other places. But the bottom line is the president, like everyone sitting in this room, is entitled to a fair trial. And we're going to get that.
In his
Donald
statement,
Trump has said that even if he's convicted, he will still continue to run for president. Do you think that is, in many cases, if you're convicted of a crime, that sort of puts you out in terms of a job that you may be seeking? Do you think it would be okay for him to be president of the United States if he's convicted of this crime?
In a case where there's a political prosecution, there's no doubt that he's going to continue to run. None of these charges preclude him from being president of the United States, not one.
real quick, the Trump campaign yesterday called this reminiscent of Nazi Germany in the 1930s, the former Soviet Union, and other authoritarian dictatorial regimes.
I think what all Americans are concerned about
But comparing this to the Nazis?
All Americans are concerned about this, the criminalization of free speech. When I'm in that courtroom, I'm not going to be representing only the President of the United States. I'm going to be representing every American that wants to speak freely, because this is the first time that the Justice Department has been turned on free speech.
But comparing it to the Nazis, you think that's a good move?
Listen, what we're dealing with right now is a Justice Department that's outside constitutional bounds, and everyone's entitled to raise that issue.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there this morning. John Lauro, thanks so much. So much to
so
discuss
much to
here. I know.
Come
so
back
much
and talk
to
about
ask.
it again.